What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, Poatan, what can you say? I mean, this guy, in my opinion, has had the most meteoric rise in the UFC's history.
For sure.
He's beaten 4 champions now at this juncture of his career, and his MMA career is just beginning. He's barely had 10 fights. I mean, this is truly unbelievable. He's a 2-division champion. He has knocked off now Jiří Procházka, who's been one of the most electric light heavyweights for the last couple of years, making his return fight always a difficult fight because he's so strange stylistically. So I want to talk about what's potentially coming next for Alex Pereira. But first, I think we have to touch on the X's and O's of the fight and just how spectacular of a performance this was.
Oh, it looked so good. And Alex Pereira definitely found his weight class. Of course, he looked good at 185, good enough to get the belt, but I think he was built for 205.
Yeah.
And when you saw him square off in there against Jiří, and he was bigger than Jiří, you're like, okay, yeah, he found his spot. He's perfect for 205. And it was a very interesting fight. You know, I thought that Jiří was going to have a little bit easier time getting in and trying to utilize some grappling. And while we did see them on the ground, we saw a major evolution in Pereira's game,
Yes,
where he was able to work himself up off of his back to the cage and then eventually, you know, get his distance and get back into striking range, which is a really big move for him. If you can get somebody who's never done MMA to 3 or 4 years from now, getting themselves off of the ground with Jiří Procházka on top of them in an MSG, UFC, title fight, all this stuff.
Can't understate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. I think Alex Pereira already has like an insane Hall of Fame career under his belt. And he literally, I think after last night, is like 8-2 as an MMA fighter, not even as a UFC fighter. And it's even crazier to say that Jiří Procházka has less fights in the UFC than Alex Pereira does, because both of these guys came in with such great records and such great, pedigree into the UFC that they didn't have to do a ton of heavy lifting to get to the belts. They had good fights. They really put on good performances early on in their UFC career after a great body of work before. And what I was most impressed with out of Alex Pereira was the fact that he has shown us some evolution in his striking. When you've got a guy with the pedigree that he's got and he comes in from a kickboxing world and he's just done everything you could do, like you would think that all he needs to focus on is grappling and takedown defense and then just forget about the striking because it's probably better than everybody's. But he's kind of changed his striking game up a little bit, and he's not just a kickboxer in an MMA setting. He's now utilizing some different ranges, some different angles, and different types of entries and exits that an MMA fighter would do. So I think the evolution of Alex Pereira should really be appreciated while it's taking place right now. I mean, we're getting to see it live in person, and it's really amazing. I think a win over Jiří Procházka just showed us that he belongs at the very top of the light heavyweight division. And with Jamal Hill, you know, basically ready for his title shot, that's setting up a major fight. And I don't really know how that one's going to go, but I know after last night it's going to be competitive.
Yeah, you can't count Jamal out. And it's funny because if you read social media, you would think that Jamal Hill has already lost the fight against Alex, which I get it. Pereira's far more technical than Jamal Hill. I don't think anybody would argue that. And we saw after last night, no doubt about it, Alex Pereira's got the best calf kick in the game.
Yeah.
He can land that thing. He can tell you he's going to throw it and still land it. I mean, Jiří knew that was coming, and he was still unable to check those calf kicks.
He might have taught Tom Aspinall that one in the back because he was using it just before.
Yeah, I mean, it's really something special. And when you're fighting a grappler, and that's what you talk about, the evolution of his striking, you know, obviously the calf kick is utilized in kickboxing, but it doesn't have the same effect like it does in MMA because in kickboxing, nobody's trying to take you down. It's a completely stand-up fight. But when you really tear up the leg, specifically the lower half of the leg, you can diminish a grappler's ability to take you down, and that factors into MMA, and that's a facet of the sport that's totally different than where Alex Pereira came from. So the fact that he's perfected that and now utilizes that heavily in his game shows you the evolution even in his short UFC career. But I think that even though he called out his longtime foe Israel Adesanya on the mic and said, look, I know you don't want to come back till 2027. You rescued me from the bar back in the day, and now I'm going to do the same thing because at the end of the day, we've got a camaraderie, even though it's a competitive camaraderie. We have that closeness in that relationship. I want to save you. I think you're better than that. I think you can come back before 2027. And I think he's right. I think Izzy should not wait until 2027 to come back and fight. However, Jamal Hill has done everything right.
Right.
He got the belt. He was a great champion. He's active on social media. He makes people excited about him. He makes people care about him. And he also, most importantly, relinquished the belt when the time was right, because he realized that, look, I don't want to be one of these champions that everybody grows sour with because I hold up the division and I make people fight. You know, the fight just prior to that was for an interim title. And it kind of, even though Aspinall and Sergey was just one of the most amazing heavyweight fights that we've seen in a while, there was a little bit of a shadow cast over it because it was for an interim title. And Jamal didn't do that. Jamal said, look, I'm going to relinquish the belt. You guys go handle your business. I'll come back and fight out of the blue corner when the time is right. So you cannot skip over Jamahal Hill at this point. He's done everything right. He deserves his shot. Now, if Alex is able to get past Jamal, then the conversation about that Izzy trilogy in MMA starts to get worked into the conversation, because it doesn't make sense at 185. We've seen it twice at 185. Each guy has a win on their record. If it happens a third time, it needs to happen at 205. Izzy needs to be the challenger. He needs to come up and try to take the belt off of Alex. You know, Izzy made no bones about it when he fought Jan Blachowicz back in the day, that he wanted to dare to be great and try to become a two-division champion. And when you look at his history of fighting and the resume that he's built, it's one of the most impressive resumes in MMA history. However, there's one piece of that resume that he would love to have that he doesn't currently have, that Amanda Nunes, Daniel Cormier, Conor McGregor, all of these, John Jones now, all-time greats have, which is to become a two-division champion. So the fight makes sense at 205. If Alex can get past Jamal and Izzy decides to come back, we'll see it. But for right now, I am just dying to see Poatan versus Jamahal Hill.
Yeah, you made so many great points there. And I will say that Israel Adesanya is such a competitive guy. And after last night, Alex Pereira became the 9th UFC fighter in history to have two belts, to become a champ. And I really think that Israel Adesanya has an in the octagon, competitiveness with Alex Pereira, but he also has an out of the octagon and a record versus record type of thing. And I don't think Israel is going to be able to sleep at night knowing that his biggest, opponent, his biggest foe, the boogeyman in his dreams, came into the UFC, beat him, and then, of course, he got his win back, but then this guy comes and becomes champ before Izzy's able to do it. I don't think Izzy's going to settle with just being the 185 champ. I think after last night, Alex getting the belt, he's going to want to go do the same thing. Like, it's almost like that anything you can do, I can do better type of thing.
Yep.
And as it sits right now, Alex Pereira is winning that battle between him and Izzy. And I have to say, it was a really cool move for him to call Izzy and say, basically, you gave me an opportunity, and then now we've had our feud. Everybody wants to see us fight for a third time in MMA, and there has to be something different on it, right? We can't just do it at 185. We can't do it when there's nobody's got a belt at 185. Let's make something else happen. And he was the one that went and moved up, dared to be great, just like Izzy tried, and got a belt at 205. Now there's something new added to their story. Change divisions. Now let's show the world that we're still the two best, even 20 pounds heavier at light heavyweight, and see who wins, the ultimate trilogy. I think it would go down as the greatest trilogy that the UFC's ever seen, and maybe that combat sports has ever seen. And before we go, I do want to touch on one other thing you said, because you made so many great points. The calf kick. You're so right about that. And Alex Pereira probably used the calf kick a time or two back in his kickboxing days. But kickboxers and Muay Thai fighters are so good with checking kicks. Like you said, they don't really have to worry about grappling. There's a whole element of MMA that they don't have to concern their brain with, and they don't even have to think about, which is the element of taking people down and grappling. So they can focus more on things like checking, and they can, compromise balance just to check a kick. In MMA, you don't have that luxury. But it was really cool to see Alex Pereira start to utilize those MMA techniques and things that are really getting brought into the sport as a new weapon or a new technique that everybody's starting to use. And the calf kick has shown to be one of the most effective ways to slow your opponent down. And I don't think Jiří thought he was going to have to deal with a calf kick like that. And of course, Alex Pereira has shown everybody. He showed DC on Fight Week just how effective it is. It's a great technique, and he knows how to throw it perfectly. And it was able to disrupt Jiří's stance so much that he was switching stances, and that threw off all of his movement. Jiří's one of those unpredictable guys. And while Alex Pereira is also, and they're probably both very hard to train for, like I can't imagine they were able to find many teammates or opponents to bring in for sparring leading up to this fight to help each other, because both of these guys are so unique. But making Yuri switch stances and trying to move around at a different way and out of the southpaw stance probably made it very difficult for Yuri to find his offense, which is why he started to blitz and kind of look off balance. Man, Alex Pereira really did a lot of great things in there. I think he nailed it on the microphone. I think he nailed it in the octagon. And, of course, the walkout is just as epic as any that we've seen out of Israel Adesanya.
Yeah, that thing he does, the bow and arrow, that's one of the most badass things that anybody does when they walk out. It's just the cadence, the Muay Thai thing, and then how you know it's coming. You're just waiting for it. He stops. He draws it back and lets it go, and then the crowd erupts. I mean, the UFC should really do something, and I know they're into the theatrics,
right?
But I feel like if it was like one championship or Ryzen or some organization like this, when he lets that arrow go, somehow there'd be like a fire explosion happen in the octagon or somewhere else in the crowd, like
some
like
pyrotechnics.
Yeah, some pyrotechnics. I'm getting way out of my lane here. I know nothing about that. I just feel like that would look cool.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I mean, Alex Pereira is iconic even in his short MMA career. And I can't wait to see where it goes from here because he's only getting better. And his competition and future fights are all very exciting. So the sky's the limit for Pereira. I cannot wait to see what he does next. Also, Procházka's got a bright future. He will be back. He's very exciting. He's still young in his career as well. And light heavyweight's on fire.
It absolutely is. His walkout and his little bow and arrow stance is almost like as iconic to me as Michael Jordan's logo. Right?
Yes.
That's the way it makes me feel. When I see him walk out and he looks like just this absolute stoic monster with ice running through his veins, everybody in his corner is like, you can see their emotions and they're not even the ones about to get in the fight. And he's just stone cold. I mean, Steve Austin has the name, but if there's ever been somebody that's been stone cold, it's Alex Pereira.
No doubt.